Okay, episode 13. This is probably the last episode we're going to see this guitar really featured in because we're going to finish it right now. Just little details. We're going to finish all that up, and then this guitar is going to get put aside and just played forever. As you can see behind me here, we're getting ready to start on number 2. And I'm pretty excited about number 2. My mind has really been working overtime thinking about all the different things I want to do on number 2. So we'll see that coming up here shortly, as soon as we finish up all these little details. So let's get these details done and get this guitar buttoned up. I'll document that as quick as I can right now so you can see just the last little bit that went on in the final little piece. All right, here we go. Let's get to work. Okay, I want to follow Snakehips 81 advice. If you guys have ever heard him play, you'll know why I want to follow his advice. He says this thing's way too fat, and I totally agree. I really didn't know the ideal dimensions for this. I don't know the science behind the cone and the biscuit. Lots of experimentation is going to lead me to some understanding, but I just haven't started any of that yet, so I don't know much. So I do want to shave this thing way down, maybe even to about half of its thickness. He said to use a boxwood saddle. I don't have boxwood, and honestly, I'm not even familiar with boxwood. Maybe it's a European thing but what I do have is some Ipe. I'm assuming boxwood is really hard and really dense, but I don't know. Anyway, this Ipe is the hardest, densest wood I've ever come across. This chunk right here weighs a lot. It's really heavy. The problem that I have with this stuff is I actually cut it on my bandsaw that has a metal cutting blade on it instead of my wood one, because I think this is dull my wood blade out immediately. So I'm going to make a new saddle out of this, whatever height it is it needs to be after I shave this down to the thickness that I want to shave it down. Let's modify this thing. Okay, the time lapse probably caught all the smoking that was going on there just to cut this Ipe. It's like concrete. I think I'm just going to make a new maple biscuit. When I sliced it down, it's not flat enough on the bottom. I was thinking about making it out of hickory. This hickory that I have is some really old school stuff, and it's just more dense and heavier than maple. Okay, here we go. Okay, I feel pretty good about that little guy. So it's hickory on the bottom and ipe on the top. Obviously that saddle's way too tall. And I'm probably doing a little action a little higher this time. I had it pretty low last time. So yeah. Okay, this thing's done. You can see in the video there, I sanded the neck up to 800. Actually, I think I only sanded it with 800, and then I hit it on the buffer real quick just to give it that super extra nice shine. Got that all finished up. The neck turned out great. It looks great. It feels great. The shape is perfect for slide playing for me. I kind of like a fat neck, so it's a little bit fat. I have a super thin coat of lacquer on the back, kind of where your hand would go on the back is really, really thin. In fact, you can still even feel the grain of the wood there. That's how thin it is. So it still has a nice feel. It doesn't have that sticky lacquer feel, like your hand slides and moves on it really, really nicely. I like the maple in between the fretboard and the neck. I think that's a cool little stripe detail in there. I really like how the ebony heel turned out on it. I got the side dots put in there. I just used the clay ones. They're pretty small little dots, clay dots. It's simple, it's understated, it's nice. I like how that complements the maple stripes, and I like how they look against the ebony. I got all the dots finished up on the front of the neck where the neck bolts on, where the screws go through the neck. I got all those dots put on there. You could see the technique I used in the time lapse there. I actually lightly glued the dot to a stick. I didn't want to fill the holes with glue and then put the dots in there, because then it would be really hard to get the screws out of there if that thing was all full of glue. It would be a nightmare. It would be a disaster. So there's just a tiny bit of glue around the edge of the dot, and they'll sit in the holes nicely, and it's glued in there. They'll be fairly easy to get out of there. You'll still have to drill them out, but it won't be a big mess. You'll be able to get them out and still get the screws out of the neck. Let's see, we got the biscuit bridge, a new biscuit bridge made and shaved down to a much thinner size. I should measure it so I know the exact thickness of it, and then I use that Ipe saddle that's on there. And I did a little bit of research on the boxwood that was recommended to me, and I found that, yeah, boxwood is up pretty high on the hardness scale for wood. It's higher than maple, so it's pretty hard. It's nowhere near as hard as Ipe, which is what I used on the bridge for this thing. I used that Ipe wood. The Ipe is almost twice as hard as the boxwood. The boxwood is about 1.5 times as hard as maple. So that Ipe, I mean, it's, like I said, it's like concrete. It's hard to even cut it. It's so hard. So I think the materials I'm using on the biscuit and the bridge are good. They're, you know, they're super hard, super dense, and it's not heavy either. You know, it came out good. I feel like that was a success there. It's definitely louder, and it definitely has a little bit different sound to it with the new biscuit bridge and the new saddle on there. So that's all good. I'm really happy with how my tailpiece turned out. I like all the detail that I got into it, all the bead rolling that I did on it, and the curvatures and everything in it. I think the future tailpieces I do, I'm going to cut a logo into them. I'm going to have it laser cut along with the laser cut pieces. I'll have them laser cut the shape out because it took me a long time to make that. But hopefully the same design. I like the bead roll design I did on it. It functions really well. There's no buzzes, no rattles. The tailpiece just came out great. I'm pretty happy with it. Oh, there's a little tack weld spot on it that I need to sand and polish, but in the time lapse you'll notice I was sanding the body a bit more. I only did it on the back because it really didn't help me much, but I did end up going all the way to 7,000 grit on that. My wife bought these little infinity sanding sponge, no, Infini, not infinity, sanding sponges with the wet sandpaper on there. They were something that we saw in a video from a very well-known famous luthier, and he says that those things just never wear out and they work amazing. So we ordered some, and he's right, they do work amazing, and I didn't notice them wear out at all in sanding the body. But I also noticed it didn't help me a whole lot in sanding it with those, because I really need to go back to 240 and probably, or maybe 320, and just hit it one more time and get some of those deep scratches out of there. I mentioned it before. I don't know why I sanded it with such heavy grit. It's really cost me on this one a lot of hard work. Okay, that's a wrap on this one. Tune in next week where we start on number 2 and we recess this cover plate into the top. We cut a mini humbucker hole in it because why would we ever not have a mini humbucker in one of these? That doesn't make sense. And we learn how to make the sound well better without having to make one of these rings to put in the bottom. Those are all going to be nice improvements on number 2, and that'll be fun to watch. So that's it. Thank you guys for watching. Really appreciate it.